Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Third House Forum that's sponsored by the Marion Grant County Chamber of Commerce. We're here at the City Council chambers, and you're welcome to come by and join us up until about 9:30 this morning. Let's go ahead and get started. And our moderator today is Alan Miller. Alan.
Thank you, Tim George, and welcome to everyone listening to us this morning on WBAT 1400. And hello from the Marion City Council chambers at the Marion Municipal Building. And welcome to the 2018 Third House session of the Indiana General Assembly. I'm Alan Miller, representing the Marion Grant County Chamber of Commerce, and our guests today are 5 of the 7 state legislators who represent Grant County. Joining the Chamber of Commerce today as sponsors of our event are the Chronicle Tribune, Hoosier AM/FM, Indiana Farm Bureau, which provided the donuts and coffee this morning, and the News Herald. As I said, WBAT is broadcasting this live on 1400 on your AM dial. Now let me briefly introduce our legislators. I will introduce each of them, and after that, they will each have 2 minutes, make some opening remarks before we turn to our questions and to your questions. Alphabetically, first of all, State Representative Tony Cook. They are all Republicans. Tony is from Cicero. He represents District 32 since 2015. He's a retired school superintendent. Next to him, State Senator Travis Holdman, who is from Markle, representing Senate District 19 since 2008. He is an attorney. State Representative Michael Karakoff from Kokomo. He's represented House District 30 since 2010. He's an administrator at Ivy Tech Community College. State Representative Kevin Mahan, Republican from Hartford City, representing District 31 since 2010. State Farm Insurance Agent, former Blackford County Sheriff. And finally, last but not least, but usually last with a name of Zay, Senator Andy Zay from Huntington, Senate District 17, elected by caucus just in December of last year, of 2016, not 2017. He's in the auto leasing and sales dealership business. So, gentlemen, Representative Cook, a couple minutes of opening comments. Welcome.
We had in the school reserve fund for tuitional monies. Indiana's workforce, you're beginning to hear a lot about that. Holdman and I were talking about that this morning. I know he's been involved with that. Todd Houston on the House side is carrying a bill that's involving with the governor and workforce development to try to return and assist students getting more involved and others to returning to more highly skilled, specialized jobs in the workforce. Tackling the opioids is another big goal for us at this time, and increasing government efficiency. So many of the committees have been looking at streamlining some of the archaic or redundant statutes and regulations that groups have to follow throughout the state. I myself have 5 authored bills. One that's already passed will go up to the floor this week. It's a school administration bill. It's a refining and retooling of 1009, which was passed. A bill that I carried 2 years ago. Actually, it was passed last year. Gives schools a little more flexibility moving money around in their silos. And another bill I have will be on school bus safety and seatbelts, and the township bill that we're working through. I have an amendment that involves cemetery associations. Also, I'm co-authored on 12 right now, soon to be 13 bills, it sounds like, as of last night. So it's going to be a busy session. It's a short session, so we're really moving rapidly and trying to move a lot of things that are non-budgetary, since it's non-budgetary year for us.
Thank you, Representative. Senator Holdman.
Yes, thank you, Alan. Thank you to the Chamber and Farm Bureau for hosting today, and for for the radio station. It's great to have those guys here this morning. I think you guys will be in at the State House coming up early March. Look forward to that when you're there. I just want to mention that Senator Buck would be here, except he is in Clinton County this morning at a third House meeting. He shares Clinton County with Senator Hirschman, but Senator Hirschman, if you're up on the latest news, resigned his seat in the Senate to take a job out in D.C. And so Senator Buck was the only legislator that could be at the Clinton County third House meeting this morning. So he sends his apologies and regrets he can't be here today. We share the same agenda pretty much in the House and the Senate this year, being a short session. With the departure of Senator Hirschman, I was named as the chair of the Tax and Fiscal Policy Committee. Senator Hirschman called me about 3 weeks before session began and told me, he said, Travis, I put you down as second author on all of my bills that I filed for tax and fiscal. And I said, so why are you telling me that? And he said, because I'm not going to be there. We have a 10 bill limit. I was already at 14 bills that I had in process, and I ended up with about 7 additional bills. And so the first 2 or 3 days of session, I was unloading legislation on other friends of mine. And there are a few that aren't friends much anymore because I gave them a bunch of crazy stuff, but willing to work and help me out. Being a short session means that we will not be opening the budget except in cases where there are particular issues of high priority that needs to be done or might be on the governor's agenda. As Representative Cook mentioned, school funding to make up the loss that we would see with the net 2,200 additional students that we have in Indiana. That's only 2,200 students. When you take a look at over 1 million K-12 students in the state of Indiana, we're just slightly over 1 million students. So 2,200 is not a lot. But we're talking somewhere in the neighborhood of about $25 million to fund those 2,200 kids. And so we have to make that up in some fashion. And so the House has already passed legislation. The Senate has a piece. It'll go to conference and we'll come up with a good solution to keep schools at that same funding level. I'm proud that we were able to get Senate Bill 123 out of the Senate this week. That was the baby box bill. Seems rather insignificant, but I view it as a real pro-life measure that we were able to take, which expands the use of baby boxes or newborn safety devices to fire stations across the state that are staffed 24/7. We already had a surrender of an infant in Michigan City in November with a mother that gave up her baby. This is done anonymously. This is in a special device that's mounted inside the wall. The mother can open the box. When the box is opened, an alarm goes off. The baby is placed inside in a heated or cool padded device. And then when the door is shut, another alarm goes off so that the folks on duty, whether it's in a hospital or in a fire station, know to go and rescue that baby. That baby has since been placed for adoption, and we're very excited about the fact that we're going to be able to deploy those. We already have 3 hospitals who have contracted to install safety devices in their hospitals, and just about every other day we get a fire station calling saying, how can we get one of these baby boxes installed? This does not cost the state of Indiana anything. These are all paid for with donated funds, and thanks to the Knights of Columbus, they have stepped up and said, as long as we can, we will fund the deployment of all these baby boxes. So it's a great project if you belong to a service organization in your community for folks to be able to do that in the community and help pay for those. So thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Yeah, thanks for acknowledging that Senator Buck wasn't here. I should have mentioned also that Representative David Wilkins is our 7th legislator who was also unable to be with us today. So Representative Karakal.
Thank you, Alan. Good morning. Appreciate everybody coming out so early. My colleagues have shared very well the agenda that we have before us in the session this year. I thought I'd give you a little bit of kind of statistical information on the number of the bills that have been filed, and then talk a little bit about one specific bill that Senator Holdman, I'm hopefully going to send to you, and it's not a crazy bill. It's a bill you're going to like. In the House, there have been 450 bills filed. In the Senate, there have been 436 bills filed. 20 have found their way out of the Senate, and 11 have found their way out of the House. So as you can see, the session really is just getting going. With 886 bills filed, there's a lot of ideas out there. Some ideas are similar both in the House and Senate. I have a bill idea, 1262, that's really allows for local political subdivisions to contract with a clearinghouse to collect delinquent taxes on property tax. And this bill, actually, the genesis of the bill was House Bill 1381 last year. It was melded into Senate and rolled at 515. So what the clearinghouse did is they contracted with just a handful of cities to run kind of a pilot test and see how they could intercept income taxes that were delinquent for property taxes. Had great success. I'll give you some statistics there. I'm just going to highlight three. Marion County sent out 2,185 letters to people that had delinquent property tax and an income tax refund. Just 2,185, and that yielded $2,120,000 without even having to do the intercept. Just simply the threat that we're going to take your income tax refund if you don't pay your property tax. We had testimony from the Marion County Treasurer that some of these delinquent tax bills were a decade old. So it's showing tremendous promise. So with just a $7,800 investment in postage yielded $2 million. A couple other examples from smaller counties, which hopefully Grant County, Howard County, counties I represent will become involved. Henry County sent 3,000 letters, collected $72,000. Lawrence County sent 999 letters and yielded $49,768. And that just doesn't go to the county. That goes to every political subdivision within the county. So the county gets a share, the city gets a share, townships, libraries, virtually everybody that's getting a piece of the mill tax is going to get their piece of income. Now, arguably, over time, it won't always yield the same money because we'll clear up some of these delinquent taxes. Last year's bill kind of prioritized, codified the prioritization of delinquent payments. As you know, delinquent child support can be captured from income tax refunds. There are delinquent loan payments to our state colleges, IU, Purdue, Ball State, Ivy Tech. If you don't pay your student loans back, you have income, the state can capture that income tax refund to pay those debts. So last year's bill kind of codified the priority of these and allowed for a clearinghouse to, it's not a collection agency, it's a clearinghouse, and it reaches out. And in the event that they don't respond, then they go after them. So it's a really good bill, and it's a way to increase our revenue stream from delinquent taxes short of amnesty. So I probably used more than my 2 minutes, but that's just one example of the almost 1,000 bill ideas that are out there.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Kevin Mahan. Kevin, good morning. Good to be back here in Marion and to see a lot of familiar faces. And I was sitting here as they were talking. I went around the room and scanned everybody. There's 19 people that's in this room right now that I've had the opportunity to sit in a assisted living facility or in my office in Hartford City or in Cary Services or at Jackie's Restaurant or Bob Evans for breakfast. And I sit here and see a lot of these familiar faces that I've had the opportunity to work with over the past several months leading up to this this General Assembly. And I thank you for being here, being engaged, and I thank all the sponsors as well. This is the way government is supposed to work in the democracy that we're in. So thank you for participating. I want to just give a couple examples here. As Mike said, of the 450 bills that were filed, 11 of them have passed on third reading. One of those 11 is my bill, House Bill 1180. And I just want to tell you, just so you can understand the process, so that you all understand, I've said this for many years, we do not live in a vacuum in Indianapolis and sit around in rooms just amongst ourselves.
$14,000 represents about 4% of my budget that I have for all medical supplies on my trucks. It would be nice if state law would allow us to use an injectable, which we can get for about $8 to $10. So I called my friend, State Rep Davison, who's a pharmacist. He said, that's great. We did it for schools last year. I called Representative Tim Brown, who's a medical doctor. He was an ER doctor for many years. He said, makes sense to me. I went to the Department of Homeland Security that oversees the Emergency Service Commission that would be charged with putting the training together. They had no objections. The long and the short of it is, because of what happened with a public servant sitting in a restaurant, having a glass of tea, and having people engaged, just like you're being engaged here today, resulted Thursday, before I came home for the week, a 94-0 passage on third and final reading, and we're now sending it over to the Senate, where I'm confident it will pass there, and that's how a law is made, ladies and gentlemen. So just kind of want to give you a little bit of encouragement as you participate in the process. Now, does it mean that your idea or whatever it may have, that all of them's going to go that way? Absolutely not, right? We're not all the University of Alabama where it's an automatic national championship every year, but just want to let you know that. The other thing is, and I see Jim Allball here that's with Carry Services, and I'm going to get to see him Tuesday on House Bill 1257, and that deals with the, I won't get too much into the weeds with it, but between NR that he's a part of, and it deals with the Ability Indiana program. This is, there's 33 agencies throughout the state that employ people with disabilities that otherwise would probably be unemployed. They employ a total of about 600 people. It's about a $13 million impact, and we're looking to bring some clarifying language there and try to expand that program so that it affects more people. That's coming to the committee that I chair, which will be Tuesday at 10:30. Jim, you're first up on the docket, and we're going to get that through committee, and we're going to make life better for those with disabilities, and it's going to affect the people here with Carry Services. Then right after that, if you want to stick around, we're going to be dealing with the mergers of townships that we're going to have a follow-up meeting on, which might still get a little bit dicey. So thank you very much.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about township reform and the state use bill later.
I'm very happy to be back here in Marion. Always enjoy my visits down here, and like Kevin, I've had the opportunity to represent Megan. Sorry about that. I've had the opportunity to meet with a lot of you one-on-one and be in your agencies, be in the schools, spend a lot of time with your mayor at different events, and have worked closely with him on a few important issues like the drug epidemic. I think the agenda for this year has been pretty well laid out. I'm just going to share a little bit of what I've been working on and what I've been very passionate about. When I got involved in the Senate and began to delve into the issues, I served on the Education Committee, which I've been on a huge learning curve with that over the last 14 months, really investing in that, investing in my superintendents. Getting in the schools, probably met with 5,000 to 6,000 kids in the last year at one point or another, either down in Indianapolis or up here in the schools or in other forums. So I've been thrilled to do that. But what I realized as I worked my first bill through the House last year, which was a foster care bill, is what kind of epidemic we have in the Department of Child Services. We've grown from about 18,000 cases to 29,000 cases in just 4 years. And what came to me is that is unsustainable. That is something we simply can't afford as a state financially. We can't afford as a society to have our kids in this going through and in and out of foster care and going through those transitions. So I've tried to be a part of that, but what I learned in being intimately involved with DCS is that the opioid crisis is right beside it. 80 to 90% of those cases from the folks on the ground, they say are directly related to that. Statistically, I think it's a little bit lower, but they also include in there things like alcohol and other addictions. So I've been trying to be very proactive with that, tried to bring communities together, tried to have some open forums, and have had. We just had a great one yesterday, had 80 community leaders from the 4 counties. Some folks came down from Allen County, had some folks up from Indianapolis. There's no silver arrow, there's no silver bullet. It's a very difficult crisis to get our hands on and get a hold of. Had a phenomenal presentation by one of your own, Amber Million from Marion General Hospital, and the efforts that she has made in trying to impact that crisis down here in Marion. Had a great presentation from the Bowen Center, and had a direct witness from 1 or 2 folks, from actually 2 folks that have come through the process, been down that dark alley. It is a difficult thing. It is something that we need to get a hold of as far as the state. This may eat us alive financially. Right now, we're spending $1.5 to $2 million a day just on these DCS cases. So when you talk about expanding investment in education, you talk about expanding investment in infrastructure or any other part of our budget, that won't be available if we can't get a hold of some of these, of the opioid crisis and of these DCS crisis, which is right beside it. But I've been happy to do that, been happy to bring some people together, share best practices in the communities that I serve. I've worked very closely with Senator Houshin down in the Senate to one tool I believe that the state has is the inspect bill. We're trying to enhance that and make a greater participation in that. That way we know where opioids are being prescribed from, we know who they're being prescribed to, so our citizens can't go out and pill shop, can't go from physician to physician. There's a lot of challenges and there's still a lot of consternation as what the best practice is to help these people out of addiction. But it's an important thing to be engaged. I believe that the opioid crisis and the drug crisis is our life issue of the day. And with that, I'll call it 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. All right, we're ready for questions. I will continue those on a rotating basis alphabetically. When I ask a question of a member of the House of Representatives, I would like someone from the Senate to respond to it. Begin with Representative Cook. It's an education-related question. You serve on the Education Committee, sir. Senator Zay, I would ask you to be the Senate responder since you are on the Senate Education Career Development. Relates to the computer science curriculum bill. Senate Bill 172 would require Indiana schools to offer computer science courses for students. I believe it also establishes some grants for training teachers to teach those classes. Where is the bill headed? Is it likely to be approved? What do educators have to say about it? Senator Representative Cook.
Thank you. Yes, I am Vice Chairman of the Education Committee in the House, but we have not received that bill yet. It's on the Senate side. I don't think it can be a bad thing. It's not, it's a Band-Aid. We have a lot going on with the pathways right now and trying to decide on the diploma situation in the state, which has been our focus on the House side right now. I think if it's presented in the right fashion, teachers have not reacted to it in a negative way. They have questions about how will it be focused with all the other curricular aspects that they're now required for those diploma credits. So anything that can benefit kids in the automation side, in the data processing side, the mathematical aspects that go with that, I think is a good thing. That's the world they face. That's the world they work in right now. So I think as a tool, potentially in the toolbox, particularly on the math or the science side that requires, that could be a positive thing. But I'm leery in what gives on the other side. If you take this, you have to take away something else in their schedules to be able to get that, or in their required program. So I'm interested in seeing it, but I think it has good possibilities.
Senator Zay?
I think it's a very interesting bill. It's an interesting concept. It is something that is being the governor's initiative. I think the thing you really need to wrap your head around when you talk about this is the application of computers. It's not computer science as we knew it when us young folks were in school and learning Fortran and different languages, but it's really the application of computers. It's been stated that 20% of the careers that our kindergartens and first grade, as they go in, will be gone because they will be taken over by automation. And there's one career that's kind of interesting. I heard this at a conference just a couple months ago. Very few people do longhand division right now. If we go to division, we go to our phone. But it's a matter of, there's one career that does that, and that's the teacher that teaches it. So it's a matter of taking math, and it's a matter of taking science application and using that coding and using those computer processes, and that enabling us to grow and become better educated and really prepare for the workforce of tomorrow. And the great thing is there's a company out there, and several companies that are willing to take our teachers and just teach them some of these processes of coding, not to make it a complete computer science class, but to bring the application into the traditional courses we have of math and science and those things. So it's about being smarter with our technology and trying to integrate that in the classroom where they can be smarter in using that and bringing that out and being prepared for the workforce. And I think that's great hopes of passing in the Senate.
Thanks, sir. Senator Holdman, alcohol reform. Senate Bill 1, Senate Bill 26. Senate Bill 1, referred to as the Sunday Sales Bill. Senate Bill 26, the cold beer in grocery stores and convenience stores. 2 questions, sir. We have been told Senate Bill 26 is dead. Question 1, is it likely to be revived? And what's the fate of Senate Bill 1, the Sunday Sales Bill? Both in the Senate now.
Answer to the first question is yes, it's dead. Cold beer is going to get warm before it's stay warm probably. Sunday sales, I anticipate is going to pass. I think the House is probably a few days ahead of where the Senate is on the issue. Currently, what we're looking at is 12 p.m. to 8 p.m. on Sundays for Sunday sales. It was on second reading just Thursday. There was one amendment offered by Senator Italian, and that amendment was voted down. And the goal has been to keep a clean bill. The problem that we can't get this issue resolved in the legislature every year is there will be a bill for Sunday sales, but then it gets loaded up like a Christmas tree with all other issues because about 25% of the folks in the hallway, the lobbyists, have some interest working for a distributorship or a brewery and have some interest in that, and even
okay, that's coming down. It is starting to come down. It's gonna be interesting to see what because I put on the survey again this time. All right, and some people can say, it's just a survey. Now, I'm not a big poll guy. Everybody wants to hear, oh, this poll said calling 600 random people in Indiana. No, if I get a survey from Eric Waltz, I know what Eric wants. I know his address, and I know that what he put on there, and that means something to me. Okay, so it's going to be interesting to see where that trends. So I think the Senate has a policy that when something's dead over there, it's dead over there. It can't be revived. for the most part. In the House, because of that, I don't see Sunday alcohol sales going anywhere. However, I don't see cold beer going anywhere, but I do see the Sunday alcohol sales, as the senator already said, probably happening between 12 and 8 o'clock. And, I talked to many of you about this issue. I gave you the history lesson all the way back to Prohibition. The issue is much deeper than, well, it's crazy, I can't pick up a 6-pack on Sunday before the Colts game. I mean, there is some policy here. It is a controlled substance, and there's a long line of history of these antiquated laws that's been on the book that men and women have built their businesses around, and it can be emotional issues for people as well. So I would agree, you will probably not see cold beer sales, but you will see the Sunday alcohol sales. And quite frankly, what I hear from people in the district, I don't hear people knocking my door down saying, I think that's crazy. I ought to be able to fill my truck up with gas and go in and buy some cold beer. I don't hear that. But what I do hear is, I feel like I ought to be able to buy my alcohol on Sunday. That's what you're probably going to get.
Thank you, Representative Mahan. Representative Carrick, House Bill 24 will repeal the Indiana law requires a person to get a permit to carry a handgun. 2 questions. What's the thinking behind the bill? And is there a specific constituency driving this measure? I guess 3 questions. Are there enough safeguards in the bill regarding people who already are banned from carrying a handgun? House Bill 24.
If it's maybe 1024, Representative Lucas.
1020.
Yeah, Representative Lucas's bill. I've asked this question in my survey, much like Kevin spoke about on liquor issues. Quite frankly, it's not an issue that I hear a lot about. If you are passionate about carrying a handgun, there are permitting procedures in place for you to carry that handgun. There's a fiscal attached to this because the fees that are collected for your common carry permit is what funds the training of our law enforcement officers across the state. I do know there's a Senate bill out there that removes the fee but still requires the background checks and the permitting. In discussions I've heard among our membership in the House, I don't think it's going to get a lot of traction. Don't know that it's been scheduled a hearing yet. If it does, it'll be interesting to hear the testimony if it comes out of committee. I think the safeguards are in place with the permitting. I can tell you, I listened to quite a bit of testimony this summer when the Summer Study Committee reviewed this. And people want people that carry a handgun concealed to have background checks. They want them on a registry, and they want to know who's carrying the guns. And I've surveyed in my district. Law enforcement is adamantly opposed to doing away with it. So if anything would happen, the fee might be pulled away, but I don't see the requirement for background checks and registration of concealed carry weapons going away. House Bill 1022, he says.
What's that?
House Bill 1022.
I don't know where I got the wrong number. Either the senators want to comment on the right to carry a handgun legislation?
No.
Neither of you? Very, very well. Senator Zay?
I think he answered it well. I mean, I concur with a lot of what was already shared. It's a delicate issue. It is a right to carry. I mean, we have a constitutional right to carry our guns. We should do that. But in the society we live in and the situations we have, to do that blindly is difficult challenge. So I think the background check and some of that's important to keep in place.
Thank you.
Excuse me, I might add one more thought. In the testimony this summer in the committee, there was a lot of things about, it's a constitutional right. You shouldn't have to pay for your constitutional rights. And I get that argument. But freedom of speech is a constitutional right. And there's a whole lot of permits being paid for these licenses for the very station that's broadcasting this forum this morning. They pay a pretty heavy licensure fee. So it's not uncommon for regulation and fees to be attached to some of our constitutional rights. Just another observation when you really dive into what the committee work was over the summer. Thank you.
Representative Mann, you already touched on township reform legislation, which you co-authored, I believe, specifically the requirement that would cause townships with fewer than 1,200 people to merge with another township. Talk about township reform legislation. Obviously, an idea that was advanced 10 years ago in the Kerner-Shepard report. Much more drastic recommendations than what you're proposing, but talk about whether it's going to fly. That would affect 3 townships in Grant County. For those of you that might wonder what the impact would be on our county. Look, Liberty Green and Richland, I believe. Go ahead.
Yeah, so this is House Bill 1005, and I think it's kind of a coincidence that it's House Bill 1005 because there's 1,005 townships in the state of Indiana. How ironic is that? This is really difficult in 3 to 4 minutes to talk about 200 years of history, right? So township government was created, as we know, 200 years ago when we had horseback and carriage, and it was a day's trip to get on a horse and make it to the Grant County courthouse, or those type of things. And that's why your townships were created, so that you could have township that's close to the people. Now, I am going to do one participating thing here. I did this in Delaware County yesterday at a forum where there was about 90 people. If you can name all 3 of your township advisory board members by name, please raise your hand. Look around the room, folks.
Trustee. For the record, the hand being held is a township trustee.
So for those listening at home, Bryce Courier, Center Township trustee, who does an awesome job, is the only person out of maybe 50 folks that are here that can do that. But the government that's closest to the people is the best. That's what I hear, right? Well, I don't necessarily disagree with that, but come on. I mean, we need to have township government, township trustees, and all these advisory board members. And one person out of 50 people in here can even tell you probably who their trustee is and who their advisory board is. What's that? Oh, I see. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, right here. Okay. 2. There's 2, so let the record stand. So here's what, you fast forward here. There's something called a Kerner-Shepard plan. It was done probably about 8 years ago. 2 well-respected Hoosiers, Democrat, former governor of Kernan, and a chief justice of Randy Shepard. And it was commissioned. It was a big report that was put out of what should be done with government, how it should be reformed, and many of these type of things. Part of that was we just need to abolish township government. So when I came into the General Assembly in 2011, I was the vice chair of the committee. I took over the next year as the chairman in 2012, and that was then Governor Daniels last year in office, and they had a bill for Representative Foley to abolish township government. Bryce knows I'm the one that ended up pulling that bill in the 11th hour and it didn't go forward. And so I'm the guy to blame for that. But my message to the township association was, you've got to quit coming and being on defense all the time and show what you're in favor of. The township association themselves advised me that they have identified 400 townships out of 1,005 that should merge. Folks, we have some townships in Indiana, one of them has 30 people in it. We're sitting here paying a trustee, we're paying 3 advisory board members. This same township that has 30 people in it has handed out 6 poor relief checks in 9 years. Okay, so the concept here, last year I had a bill to eliminate townships, and I just put it to the side, and I charged Cindy Zemke, Representative Zemke, to work with the Township Trustees Association. They've worked together all summer long. This has been a long process. This is a Township Trustee Association bill, to where they're sitting here, they're identifying, if you're under 1,200 in your township, you need to be merging with someone else. You're getting to the point, you're getting to be too small to be a unit of government in today's society. There's some efficiencies that can be found. Now, I want to point out, this doesn't affect school lines. This doesn't affect precincts. Okay, so none of that's going to change. It's just strictly dealing with that township. And it's going to require them to merge. It's a lot of local control here. They're going to be able to decide who they want to merge with and who they don't want to merge with, and how they kind of want to have that makeup of that. So the bill would not take effect until 2023, right? So we're going to have another election in here. It's going to take some time. We had the hearing on it last Tuesday. It's coming back this coming Tuesday after we put this awesome bill through for those with the disabilities. And we're going to be amending it, and we're going to see if we can get that voted out in committee. Try to do the best I can to talk about 200 years of township government here in just a couple minutes.
Thank you, Kevin. Either senator want to comment on the township reform legislation? Senator Holdman?
I'll just say I was part of the fight back several years ago with Representative Lehman was, or excuse me, Representative Mahan, excuse me, gosh, my good friend Kevin Mahan, that went through all of the turmoil that we went through with questioning issues that go on with township government and trying to be more efficient. And I think there's argument made for government being close to the people and how do we take care of folks that are in need of poor relief in those communities. It would be very difficult if we did away with some townships for them to get from where they live all the way to the county courthouse to ask for help with their gas bill or with their rent. And I think we need to be sensitive to that, but at the same time, we've got to be sensitive to the fact that we're wasting taxpayer money with how we're doing business in the state of Indiana. And I think we just need to be aware of that and take the necessary steps.
And they asked about that coming forward, the Township Association Executive Director Driscoll. And so I think there's definitely some overhaul needed to happen.
Alan, I do want to just make two more quick comments on this, is that, and this isn't a political issue, Democrat, Republican, right? I've had Democrat county chairman and Republican county chairman that have come up and say, I am tired of trying to find people and beg people to run for some of these positions. It's getting to the point nobody wants them. I've had current advisory board members that have come and told me, this is kind of scary. You know, I got talked into sitting in this elected position to go handle taxpayer dollars, government monies, and I don't even understand government funding and finances, and I'm expected to be voting on things that I've never had any formal training on this. I don't know. I mean, when you hear this, folks, it's kind of scary when you think about it. The other thing is I hear there are a lot of great volunteer fire departments that are out here. But go talk to them. They're having fish fries, pancake breakfast. They're doing anything and everything they can to try to come up with enough money or to have the proper oxygen tanks to go into buildings and fight. They're on shoestring budgets, okay? And I'm not one of those that thinks that just because you're bigger, you're better. I don't think that whatsoever. But I think when we're getting to that point, what's wrong if we were to sit here and cause some of these people to get together, expand those lines? I know in my hometown of Licking Township, their volunteer fire department now, they've expanded the lines. You don't have to live within Licking Township to be on that volunteer fire department. They're hard up for volunteers. So they've extended their lines that way as well. So just want to make those two observations.
Thank you. I mentioned that the legislation would affect 3 townships in Grant County. For your information, Grant County has 13 townships, if you're not aware of how many there are. So Senator Zay, we are ready for you. My annual question about redistricting reform, which I will ask without my usual editorial comment. I will note, however, that the issue of legislation reform, gerrymandering, appears to be on the radar of the U.S. Supreme Court in a big way. is that likely to give added attention this session to the bills that have been introduced in each house to establish a nonpartisan redistricting commission? Senator Zake.
Well, the first reality of redistricting is it will always be political. Even if you appoint a board, there's still going to be political. And when you get down to how you're going to set up the districts, what comes into play in that? I mean, when you look at the composite and the makeup of our state and trying to break it up evenly between Republicans and Democrats, trying to break it up in the ways statutorily that we need to, it gets very difficult to say that there won't be an element or something that could at least be perceived as gerrymandering. I believe that what we have now is pretty good. And also another thing to recognize is all this needs to come back because it's our responsibility to sign off on it as legislators anyhow. So any plan would need to come back to the legislature. So yeah, I think there'll be some attention to it. I know there's been some attention brought to it. I'm not certain whether it'll get a hearing through the election committees. And all I have to say about it, I don't think that we will see it. And I know that there has been some attention brought to it.
Thank you. Any members of the House? Members of the House like to comment on that? Mike Perry.
You know, Senator Zay summed it up pretty well. Several years ago, we actually got a redistricting bill out of the House, and it didn't go very far in the Senate. No matter what type of commission that gets formed, people have opinions, and our constitutional responsibility is the House and the Senate vote on the boundaries. And so anything that any districting commission would do would find its way back before the House and Senate for ultimate ratification. The system works. By any measure, the maps that were drawn most recently are more compact. Our communities of like interest actually got bipartisan support in the House when those maps passed. If it should find its way out of committee, I'd probably be willing to look at it and be supportive as I was in the past. But it's one of those things. There's a small cross section of people that can really paint a picture that it's so unfair. But we live in a red state, and the maps were drawn by our Democrat colleagues, and there were 60 Republicans elected in maps drawn by Democrats. And if you look at those maps, if you take a good hard look at the old maps, you will see they were lots of miles, not necessarily communities at miles on the boundaries, not necessarily communities of interest. So lots of broken school districts set up. So we minimize that now, and if we were to get it again, it'd be something I'd certainly always want to have input. But as Senator Zay said, I just don't see that overwhelming appetite for it.
Sort of a philosophical follow-up to the redistricting comment. That's for you, Representative Cook, but I'll welcome input from any of you. One person in our audience says, with Grant County having 7 representatives in the legislature, do you make at times during your legislative careers a coordinated effort to get together and talk about what's right, what's good, what your responsibility is to Grant County? I guess, do you confer about our well-being as a group or individually? Representative?
Absolutely, and I think it's representative of who's here today, and several of these individuals that are here in the room speak to us out of session or communicate by email to us out of session. I will commend Kevin for bringing up. Both of us had events here in the county during the off season. Mine was at Ivanhoe's, and next time I'm hoping to have one over in Fairmount, where we had coffee chats. I had 6 of those. I'm one of the unique people here that has 6 counties. And most of the issues come down to issues of how they affect any of the counties or all of the 92 counties in the state of Utah. But these gentlemen up here, all of us have conferred, or we've actually worked on bills together. Senator Holdman has referred bills to me. I've got bills that I've referred back and forth to the Senate side. And we are really into, Andy and I talked a lot about education. We served on the study committees this summer on all the educational issues. I serve on Kevin's committee. Mike and I have bills together and have had since we both come together that have affected this area. And we continually get that question, and it goes back to how lines are drawn, and, you know, based on approximately 65, 67,000 people. Well, we've got lots of, for a representative, we've got lots of areas of Indiana where that drawing, and I'm an old history teacher, government teacher, you start growing out and try to get 67,000 people or 120-some thousand people. You've got areas where we've got lots of representatives on our side that have 8 counties, 6 counties, 7 counties. Go the whole western side, like Sharon Nagel does, Representative Nagel. We have that automatically still going to happen no matter what commission puts things together. But absolutely, and I think you have an advantage because when we come together, the 3 or 4 of us, nobody else has 3 or 4 or 5 or 7 representatives sometimes down there that are protecting your interests. You know, that's a whole different thing. We get accused the opposite, that sometimes we have more interest that we're pushing for our particular area instead of the larger parts of the state. So all that enters into. That's kind of a long-winded one, but I think that speaks for colleagues.
Well, I just think it's a great question because we would be foolish not to. I'm obviously on the education committee. I've never been a superintendent yet. I'm passionate about it. I want to make a difference in education, and it's important that we rely on each other's personal history and experience in those arenas. We have law enforcement represented. Senator Holdman and I work together on finance insurance. He has a huge background in banking in those arenas. And I hope I bring a business perspective and family perspective to the Senate. And it's important that we build and tie and draw on those relationships to understand how the policies affect Grant County, this part of the state that we represent. And certainly the implications of that are much broader in representing the entire state.
Representative Jericho, go ahead.
Great question. I appreciate it. It wasn't a month ago, I was out at the airport with the mayor, meeting with officials from the airport authority that have interest in seeing sewer lines extended. And I was a city councilman for 7 years in Kokomo. I have local government experience, a lot of similarities between Kokomo and the city of Marion. And I just think that there are a lot of advantages to having a breadth and depth of legislators representing Grant County. It gives you more people. You have multiple committee chairmen. You have people that serve on Ways and Means, that have sheriff, city council experience, where you can go out and brainstorm and give ideas and talk to them about ways to try to help in their community. So I think there's an advantage to it. Yes, since the day I started representing Grant County, I've always said, well, there's nobody that lives in Grant County. Representative Mahan probably lives less than a mile from the county line. And I know he's here a lot. He represents a majority of Grant County. I represent really just a very small portion in the western side, but I can only recall one occasion where I've been invited to Grant County that I was unable to attend. And I really appreciate it because for me, it just shows me the similarities between in rural Indiana, no matter what county you're in, that whether it's agribusiness or people that commute into cities, township government, the kind of the built-in strife between county government and city government that we see from time to time. I really enjoyed representing multiple counties because in my previous district, my entire district was in one county. So I think it's an advantage for you, and we do collectively. Just a couple of years ago, we passed the Marion Grant County Chamber of Commerce's #1 legislative agenda item, and that was the cherry picking bill, where there was really unfair recruitment of students that were children in poverty that were high performing, and we put a stop to that practice, and that was largely because of the support and assistance we got from folks in your legislative affairs branch, your local chamber. So that's just another person's perspective on a good situation.
Anything else? Thank you, gentlemen. One item that's on the agenda of the State Chamber of Commerce I'd like to ask you about relates to smoking. The State Chamber was asking for legislation that would, one, raise the smoking age from 18 to 21, and two, would give employers the right to screen prospective employees for smoking or tobacco use. The only bill I could find that actually is introduced is House Bill 1380, which would raise the smoking age from 18 to 21. It seems the thing that's got the most focus in that bill is raising the cigarette tax from 99 cents by $2. So that's a question, Senator Holdman, even though it's a House bill. You want to defer to one of the House members? Okay, let's bypass you. Kevin, you want to attack that?
Yeah, so, gosh, listen, I mean, I have all the personal reasons in the world to support it, right? I mean, if anybody knows anything about my family and with strokes and attributed to smoking, and a son that's asthmatic that I've had to rush him out of restaurants because back when you could smoke in restaurants, right? And I was one that voted against the smoking ban because my district didn't support it. Okay, plus I think it was kind of hypocritical because it wasn't statewide. We exempted some folks out. I just thought that was very unfair. But I am all for doing just about anything we can to try to reduce the amount of smoking. Over 50% of our Medicaid expenses that we spend is attributed to smoking. Let that sink in for a minute. 13% of $31 billion is our Medicaid expense. Let that sink in, and over 50% of that's attributed to smoking. We've got to do something about it. I put this question on my survey about raising the age to 21. Now, I don't have the final results yet, but I did inquire about this on my drive home to the State House yesterday, talking with my LA, and he told me that from preliminarily what he can tell, it's kind of an overwhelming yes. They think we ought to raise the smoking age to 21. So I don't know where this is in the committee process. Mike's got it pulled up. He's kind of a tech guru, so he's normally a step ahead, but maybe he can tell you where we are with it. Go ahead.
Does not appear as though the hearing's not been scheduled yet. It's getting a little late in the process if a hearing's not been scheduled. There's still another week, so it's possible. The bill's authored by Charlie Brown, who Representative Brown authors this type of legislation. I supported it when I was on the city council when the initial smoking ban went into place in Kokomo. There was a lot of the sky is falling. We're going to lose our business. There wasn't a carve out put in place. It really made those bars decide whether or not they were going to be restaurants or bars. I think maybe 8 or 9 years after that ordinance passed, Kokomo did do a countywide complete smoking ban in all restaurants and bars, and the businesses survived it. Kevin is right. There's a huge fiscal impact, which is why you see the Chamber of Commerce getting on board. There have been multiple amendments on bills and ways and means to increase the cigarette tax. There's not a lot of appetite to increase the cigarette tax, but I can tell you this, there's going to be a reckoning when the federal government figures out how we're going to handle healthcare. And when that reckoning comes, we're going to have to come up with $1 billion, or we're going to have to spend less money. And one way to attack that would be to tax cigarettes. And so you might see, I shouldn't say might, I think you'll see that proposal pressed pretty strongly when that reckoning comes, because you do two things with that. You raise money and you drive people away from smoking. And because you've got to come up with that money to pay the bills. So that might be a preview of coming attractions, but I don't see it. I don't see anything going on with it this session.
Thank you.
I think
you want to comment on that?
Sure. Just one thing to keep in mind, and I think this is just one of the difficult situations that you find yourself in the legislature. We tax something because we want less of it to occur, or we see it as a true revenue source. We know that if we tax cigarettes more, there's going to be less consumption of tobacco. But we rely heavily on the revenue that comes from cigarette tax. So at some point, we're going to tax tobacco so much that it will decrease the revenues that we've depended on to fund state government. And so you're going to find that we get ourselves in a little bit of a conundrum. How do we pay for what we want to pay for if we tax something out of use? And I think that's one of the things that we got to think about, that somewhere I think there's going to be a sweet spot where we find that balance, but at some point we're going to tax something so much it's actually going to work, and we're going to have less revenue, and then we're going to have to turn to other sources of revenue which nobody else wants to talk about. And I think that's one of the difficult situations we find ourselves in with the whole cigarette tax issue as well. So.
Thank you. Several of you in your opening remarks talked about the opioid crisis in the state of Indiana. Governor Holdman has stated the state that was one of his 4 pillars. Number 4, attack the drug epidemic. He pointed out we are 15th. Indiana is 15th in the country in overdose fatalities. Despite that, looking through the list of all the bills that have been introduced in the 2018 session, I find few, if any, directly related to the opioid crisis. Is that an issue that at some point will involve legislative action? Senator Holdman?
Well, I think my colleagues could help me out, but I think last year we passed 13 bills that were turned into law to deal with the opioid crisis. And so we're really waiting to see how some of those are working. As Senator Zay said, this is a priority. The Inspect program, which is basically the computerized program when a prescription is filled, the pharmacist or the doctor will be able to go out there and see if that particular patient is abusing an opioid drug, because they will all be in the same system. And it requires physicians and pharmacies to all be a part of that Inspect program. That's a really important piece. And I think some of the things that we've done, we're starting to scale back on what we're doing. You know, last year we passed legislation that said a physician can't prescribe right out of the chute a 30-day prescription for an opioid. It can only be a 7-day prescription for an opioid. So the more pills that people have in their home, the more difficulty you're going to have. People are going to become addicted to those. People are going to break into your home and steal those, which is a common problem. And so I think we have taken steps, and that really started last session, Alan. And we've done some cleanup this year with some things that are going on. And I think we've just got to get a little bit of time here to see how this works. But it's a serious issue that we've got to keep our eye on and not take our eye off of it. So.
Yeah, thanks for putting in perspective that you did take considerable action a year ago. Any other comments on that, Senator Zay?
I would just say really the one true point, or the one true effect that we can have on the opioid crisis is the Inspect program. We have 100% participation through our pharmacies, but as of the beginning of last year, we only had 70% participation, 17% participation with our doctors. That has increased over the year. I think got up to about 47%. So one of the bills that Senator Houchin and I worked on this year is making that mandatory and a phase-in over 3 or 4 years, where all the doctors will be doing that. And what we need to understand with this opioid crisis is that the doctors that are serving us today, this is exactly how they are trained and how they are paid. They were trained to manage pain when they went through med school. It was a huge part of their training. They are reimbursed on their federal funding from Medicaid, Medicare, on the management of pain. That changed January 1st of this year to where the survey that we fill out after that service isn't dependent on the management of that pain. So some of the smartest and brightest folks in our communities who have been managing this for a long time have to be retrained. And we actually just passed a bill the other day in the Senate that has doctors going for continuing education on opioid prescription. And it's a case of teaching old dogs new tricks. I mean, because these are like I say, the brightest amongst us, the people we turn to for our care, and they've been asked to manage this pain. And now we're saying, well, what you did isn't quite right. And so now they need to be retrained. We need to respect opioids for what they are. And certainly the 7-day is a piece of that. But we can't legislate all the answers to this crisis. There is no silver bullet. There's no, answer. And that's where I've tried to hold these community forums and bring political people, bring the law enforcement community, bring the behavioral people together. And we need to manage this crisis for what it is. And, it's a human condition. It's a health condition. We as a society are demanding to be served on our pain from these doctors, and the doctors are doing what they've been trained to do. So, to Grant County and Marion General Hospital's credit, you have a rock star in Ann Vermillion managing that, handling that, giving the scope of what she can control here. But there is an outlier with a major institution here that is difficult to work around. But it's not all about legislation and fixing the opioid crisis, but it is important to keep it in the public eye.
Representative Mahan?
Just a couple things. Keep in mind, this opioid issue, it's not a socioeconomic issue whatsoever. Trust me. It's devastating. I mean, you've had folks dying in public restrooms here in Marion, Indiana, so it's a scourge. I'd be remiss if I didn't say this. Grant County's on the map. I am so proud when I get down there to Indianapolis and people sitting there talking about, boy, your prosecutor's office and those judges and what they're doing with their veterans treatment court. I see Jim Luttrell's here. I mean, with what they're doing. Dana Kenworthy, you didn't notice, when the governor gave his State of the State address, was invited to sit up here with the hoity-toits, the VIPs, right? Because of what she's doing with her drug treatment court, okay? I'm telling you, folks, you ought to be proud of what your local elected officials are doing here to attack this in a courtroom. I come from law enforcement. I was in the business in the days where we were just going to arrest our way out of this. We're not going to arrest our way out of this opioid issue, okay? Now with that one of the people on the committee voted against it and said, oh, this is just terrible, this and that. And, just because they're passing the poison around, I said, listen, I'm all for it. If they're passing the poison around, it's killing my constituents. I want Jim Luttrell to be able to go put them away for as long as humanly possible, because they're murderers is what they are. So proud to support that. I don't know. We need help on this. We need all the input, and he is absolutely correct. Annie Vermain, Marion General Hospital, is a rock star. She sits on more of these panels in the state. She's been at the governor's task force. She's presented down there, and reach out to Annie and be a good support to her as well.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
I would just add that Andy summarized that very well, and a couple of points he made, I won't go back over them. We have a House Bill 1007 that's expansion of mental health access. And I also serve on the Child Welfare Committee that looks at the FSSA, all the child welfare, the things that you're reading about a lot right now. And indirectly, we're approaching some of those too by doing things with foster care children and study, because many of them are connected to homes where they have had these issues. And so I think you're going to see, and we have done last year also, expansion of these mental health opportunities to get people intervened with quickly, especially the children in those homes. And I personally think that's what we need to do. And many of those have been expanded by allowing nurse practitioners and others in that particular field to be the supervising person there, with not having to be you have a ratio of how many doctors are assigned at X amount of facilities. And we're trying to do that with still healthcare professionals, but get it expanded so there's more access to health services.
Thank you. Kevin, I want to come back to you briefly. You mentioned in your opening comments House Bill 1257. This is of special interest to Jim Albaugh and the people of Carry Services. Just comment on that briefly so people understand what that bill would do and why it's important to the Carry Services, actually the clients that they serve.
Services is a real asset to Marion. I don't need to tell you that, but I've had the honor of touring the facility. I've had the lieutenant governor here in the past, and I've attended their fundraisers and those kind of things. And they're in the trenches dealing with the folks that by all intents and purposes, would be unemployed in Grant County if it wasn't for Carry Services. And so there's a bill that was put in place, I believe it was 42 years ago. It's now called Ability Indiana, that requires state government to purchase through these folks. There's 33 of them, 33 of these work opportunities to, like here, Kim, I believe you guys do corrugated boxes and you do shredding services, right? I'm a customer of yours at my office. And so these are those with disabilities that are employed. And so it requires the state, they don't have to go through the procurement process and those type of things to be able to utilize people like Carry Services, as long as it's like within 10% of the fair market value. Okay. The other thing is they employ folks that what we're going to do with the bill is we're going to expand it. We want to make sure services is also included as well as just product. So as an example, like a lot of your rest areas, I don't know if you know, but many of the people that clean the rest areas are these folks at the State House. You guys, we see this in the State House. Some of these folks with special needs that or have a special disability that are there cleaning at the State House. So that's what it is. It's a great bill. Representing Bob Eaton, which was Larry Bird's teammate, made the famous half-court shot years ago that advanced him in the tournament. It's his bill, and we'll be hearing it Tuesday.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Probably have time for one more question. I'm always hesitant to ask a question when I've not previewed the bill to know what it says. Two questions that may or may not be related. What kind of direct is the Indiana General Assembly becoming too involved in control of Indiana schools? The one question simply says, I'd like to hear your thoughts on House Bill 1315. This is for you, Representative Cook, specifically the part that would strip power from elected school boards. The second question relates to the potential takeover of the Muncie Community Schools by Ball State University. The question being, would that establish a tradition of Indiana viewing public school administration overall functioning? So I guess too much involvement by someone once referred to the Indiana General Assembly as the state's biggest school board. I don't know whether that's still something you hear, but comment on the relationship between the state legislature and education, public education.
Well, I would be remiss in not saying at first that those are schools that reached out to the state legislature because of the distressed situation. So a lot of folks don't understand that process, that if you get into a distressed school financial situation, then we have the DUAB board, which is a unit that examines that and then tries to assist from the state level or come in and reorganize. So it's this bill, however, carries some financial stress indicators, and Mike sits on that where that it was heard on the House Ways and Means. And that's got folks concerned about what kind of indicators are you going to use, what kind of lists are you going to post, which you don't get on that list until you're in very dire straits. I don't agree with all of it. I think it's a little punitive on the superintendent and the school board, where it has a loss of licensing if you're on that list for over 4 years. Maybe because I was one, as Pogo used to say, some of you may be old enough. I've met the enemy, and it is myself. But I do think that they should be held responsible. I'm not sure where that is yet. Whether that's because a lot of times it's school boards also, to be quite honest and straight up front with you, that they'll hamstring sometimes a superintendent on initiatives that they want to do. And they can't separate sentimentality from tough decisions that have to be made. When you're losing students, when you've had mass exodus out of your town or your city, there are tough choices you have to make. I've had to make those with my administrative assistants. And I think there's got to be a happy medium with that bill. In relation, and I could go on, but for Ball State, amen. Thank them for stepping forward. they have a lot on the line to be successful, and Muncie City to being successful, as well as Ball State as the anchor that Muncie has right now. They have some expertise both in the financial realms and in the academic realms that probably can assist them greatly in trying to turn around that ship. I don't know about how much, from what I've understood from the president of Ball State, they hope to do a mutual working relationship with however the board configuration ends up being. But I wish we would see more of that in areas where cities and the school corporation is ailing, where other big entities like that would step up that have the expertise and sometimes the financial know-how to really assist that community.
Senator Holdman first, then Representative Carrico.
Yes, thank you, Alan, for the question. I think we have to understand the legislature's role. We have the responsibility to enable the State Board of Education and local boards of education to do what they have to do to comply with federal law. And many times the legislature has to basically pass legislation that conforms to federal legislation, which is required of us. And then that gets passed on to the state board and then to local boards. But I think the issue that comes up with Muncie and Gary, Indiana being the other distressed school corporation in the state, it just comes down to good government and citizens holding elected officials responsible for what they said they were going to do. What happened in Muncie did not happen overnight, folks. People did not have their eye on the ball to realize that, in fact, they were getting themselves in deep, and it just continued to happen year after year. And the same thing in Gary. I think they're up to about $100 million of debt in the Gary School Corporation. That did not happen the last year or the year before. There comes a point when the legislature is asked to step in or has to step in to provide some solution, because the only solution that those folks have when you can't sell another bond because it's become junk on the market is to close the school down. And we can't have that happen in the state of Indiana. We have an obligation to take care of our kids and make sure that those kids receive a quality education. But it's really on the back of the local school board to make sure that those things don't happen. And to be honest with you, it's just not with the school board. Senator Buck, if he were here, he would, I'm sure, talk to you about a piece of legislation that he has that we're going to hear in Tax and Fiscal Tuesday. And it has to do with what local mayors are doing to put the taxpayer on the hook on bond issues when they're signing off as guarantor on bonds and indebtedness that the city is encountering, or that communities through an economic development incentive are encountering. And I think city councils, town boards, county councils have got to keep their eye on the ball, that you don't get yourself so far obligated and so far in debt that if a bad contingency takes place, the taxpayer is going to have to bail you out. And I think we've got to be mindful of that, and just be mindful of what our balance sheet looks like, because the problem is all of these are off the balance sheet for that local municipality. And you just have to ask a lot of questions of those elected folks. How much on the hook are we for debt that isn't on our balance sheet on the city's books?
You may have the final word this morning, Representative Carrico.
Thank you, Alan. I'll be brief. You know, House Bill 1315 is a work in progress. As Representative Cook said, both these school corporations went to the Distress Units Appeal Board because of their fiscal situation. They're very different, though. Muncie